One. All right, Jeff Morill, welcome to the Happy Hustle podcast, my man. I am super stoked to connect.
Thank you for having me on. I can't wait to talk some business with you.
Yeah, man, this is going to be fun. I mean, I love the title of your book, Profit Wise: How to Make More Money in Business by Doing the Right Things. I mean, and you did just that. You've grown one of the most successful privately held car dealerships in the entire world. And you did it by doing right by your people and by the customers. And, we had a great little pre-interview chat, and just, I love your vibe and your methodology behind business. And I know the happy hustlers are going to get so much value from this episode, just talking about, how to avoid burnout and how to make the slow buck and how to really, use business as a force for good. And I'm excited to dive into all that, Jeff. But before we do, I want to ask you, what is something interesting about yourself that not too many people know?
I might be the only vegetarian car dealer in the world. And I was inspired by my wife, who I married in 1999. It took me some years to come around, but spending a lot of time with her and being introduced to the way she sees things, I eventually got to the point where I just couldn't abide anymore. I mean, as much as I love to eat a steak or have a cut of fish, I understood what was involved to get that to my plate. And I couldn't do it anymore. And I think that's it's been good. I mean, I think it's helped me health wise, and I sleep a little better at night too.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely eat a plant-based diet for at least 3 days out of the week. I mean, fortunately for me, it's not many food miles to get a fresh trout from the Yellowstone to my plate, because I go catch it, or I go bow hunting for my own, elk, and I know exactly where it came from, so that's why I really, really do believe in the vegetarian and vegan purpose behind doing right by the planet, and how much that has a positive impact on Pachamama, our beautiful Mother Earth, when you do make those conscious choices with your diet. However, for me, I really do. I look at it as, if I can hunt and gather and fish and catch my own food and whatnot, then it's okay, because I,
sure enough.
do it sustainably.
There's a nice sustainability factor
Yep.
there. And I think one of my concerns was just the mechanization of the slaughter,
Oh yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
factory farms and that kind of thing. And when people are interested in talking to me about it, I encourage them. It's a pretty big lift to go all the way to vegetarian, or like my wife to go all the way to vegan. But the flexitarian thing, I think, offers a lot of benefits. If you can live on a few meat meals a week instead of having it at every sitting, then
Yep.
I think you enjoy the benefits of it health wise, and the planet enjoys the benefits, and you can move in that direction without taking the full plunge.
Yeah, flexitarian. I haven't heard that, but that's a good title, and I really do think, just being sustainable in life is what the happy hustle is all about, and being balanced. That's my whole shtick, man. If you don't know by now, balance equals happiness. That's like, I'm going to the grave with that, because I've had it the other way. I've been burnt out. I've, had the 100+ hour weeks and the big 7-figure VC funding deals and all this accolades and all these great opportunities. But I burnt myself out. And I think sustainability, both with your diet, both with your lifestyle, both with your relationships, that is a real key cornerstone of the happy hustle. And I'm just curious, what would you say to someone who may be burning the candles at both ends, like you maybe were, and almost, burnt yourself out? What would you say to someone in regards to burnout?
Oh gosh, I have so many suggestions, having experienced it myself so hard. I'm reminded of my own experience, which was I'd been working for 7 days a week for too long, and then I went down to six. And I did six for probably 10 years and 10
Mm,
long days. I'm sorry, 10 long years of six long days. And I think that I overestimated the replenishing ability of the other activities in my life. Like, I was draining more than I could ever possibly put in. So I guess I'd encourage people to think about making sure that what they're doing is giving them back as much energy as they're putting out. Because you
mm,
certainly see people. I mean, I've seen politicians, for instance, some come to mind, that, I mean, Joe Biden's a perfect example. I mean, he's late into his 70s, and obviously he's feeding off the energy of his experiences in such a way that he's able to keep going. And that was not the case for me. I mean, building a business was so demanding, and it was fun during the startup phase, but then you get to that lonely middle where
Yeah.
the thrill is gone. It's just long, hard hours, and some of your key people start leaving, and you struggle to hire the best
Mhm.
replacements for them. And there are years in there after starting a business. Most businesses are like this, I think. They're just really hard to make it through. And the danger is that you just keep plunging tons of energy into that instead of figuring out how to work smarter. And
Mhm.
that's what the case for me is that I didn't pull back early enough. So by the time I was burnt out, it was too late. I mean, I was just gone, just done, you know?
Yeah, yeah, so true. You really you have to look at the long game. You have to realize right now, maybe in your 20s, you can, really push hard and work those 7 days every single, hour getting after it and pushing yourself. But then there'll be sometimes in your 30s where you'll start to slow down, your momentum will shift, or maybe in your 40s or whatnot. And you have to look at how you can and build a business and build a life sustainably, that doesn't burn yourself out. And
Yeah.
I think it's a tough lesson to learn.
One of the mistakes that I didn't make, and this was my salvation, is that I knew early on that I didn't want to be working crazy hours my whole life. So I found a small group of people that I thought could be developed into a team of people that could run the business someday. And one person in particular who would later become, the partner and the managing partner in the organization, actually run things day to day. We hired him as a salesperson in 2002, and over the years, by the time I promoted him in 2017 to be the head one, if you will, the person who was responsible for what was really going on in the store, so that I didn't have to be there every day. He was totally prepared because I'd been including him in meetings and introducing him to important people at the manufacturers and vendors. And we had just had a long term, not a particularly formal process, but a long term commitment to growing him into someone who could run the business. So when I did surprise myself by burning out, I had a parachute. And the
Mm,
beauty of that is that I didn't have to sell a lot of business. I'm sorry, I didn't have to sell the business like a lot of business owners do. If the business is entirely built around you, if you're the hub of the wheel, and every decision and even daily process things have to go through you, that's fine during the startup phase. There's nothing wrong with that. You definitely learn every aspect of the business. You get really good at it. It makes you a much better supervisor later. But if that's just standard operating procedure for the rest of your career, then you never prepare those people around you to step in when it's really important, when you're sick or you're just ready to be done and you need to go do something else.
yeah, great points there. And what comes to mind is a book called Built to Sell. I don't know if you've read it, but even if you're not planning on actually selling your business, you need to build it as if you were, and build yourself out of the business where, like you mentioned, you're not the hub. Everything just, decisions flow through you, or you're the bottleneck. Like when you have proper systems and procedures in place, even if you have a personal brand business, or if you have a service-based business, or a you know product based business, it doesn't matter. You can build it with the proper procedures and proper systems that actually leverage your time most effective, so that you can have a parachute like you did, where you were training someone up, and there's checks and balances throughout the whole process. I think that's a great point there, and just something for all the happy hustlers out there listening to think about, like, how can you create systems and processes where you focus more time working on the business than actually in the business, right? And that's
Yeah, you're right.
a
I,
cliche, but it's true.
I like that you use the word repeatedly of like building systems. And I think it sounds so tedious and boring. I mean, people go into business for a lot of reasons, but one of them is just the kind of appeal of it, the thrill of doing it. And if it's a plumbing business or a landscaping business or whatever it is, a lot of the people actually like doing the work.
Mm,
I've met a lot of tree cutters who really struggle with the transition from actually cutting the trees, which is I like cutting trees myself too, on an amateur basis. the thrill of that, to actually sitting in an office and organizing crews and hiring well and making sure that the people answering the phones are doing it in a friendly way that encourages customers to want to call back. I mean, those are all, it's just hard yards. It's really
Hmm.
tough work to do, and it's not nearly as thrilling as going out in the field or going out in the shop or whatever your business happens to be and doing the work. But if you've got a pastry shop, sooner or later, and preferably sooner, you've got to get out of the kitchen and get in the situation where you're taking care of the systems and building those systems.
So true. And speaking of systems and just building in general, I mean, I know you've basically co-founded businesses in automotive retail, real estate, telecommunications, insurance that all generate over $100 million in annual revenue. I mean, that's crazy. Is that a real stat? Like, break that down
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah, last year was about 130 million, I think. I'll give you just a little bit of humility about it. Most of that revenue comes from our automotive side, the automotive businesses. The margins are not great in that business, but compared to the others that we're in, but there's just a ton of revenue, because you think about every time we sell a car, 30, 40, $50,000 at a whack.
True.
If
Yep.
you're selling, as let's just use, I used a baker example earlier. If you're selling bagels or cakes or something, margins are really good on a cake, presumably maybe 100% even you'd get. But I mean, to get to $1 million worth of cakes a year is a lot of cakes. To get
Yep.
to $1 million cars for us, it's at 50 cars, or it's not even, 40 or 50 cars. So part of that number, I just, in all candor, is it sounds a little fancier than it is, but
Hmm.
not to take away the premise of your question, which is, I think the key to what we've done is that we've made some really good decisions, and I describe them in the book. And I think the first one was a sort of a global, overarching strategic commitment to making sure that a lot of other people won along with us. As long as
Mm.
we were winning, other people were going to winning. And I mean, you can describe that very briefly as, well, that's just a win-win situation. But I'm talking about something a little more sophisticated than that. And I'll give you an example. It's something I'm very proud of. We have more women technicians in our automotive shops than any other dealership in the United States. And
Mm.
and I think it's kind of cool. But um, the reason I bring it up in this context is because we need technicians. It's very hard to find technicians, and so we started an apprentice technician program to help us attract people who weren't traditionally included in the service side of dealerships. And what that's done is it's given lots of opportunities to people who had been traditionally excluded from those opportunities. So only about 1% of technicians in America are women, believe it or not. 50,
Oh, wow.
51% of the population, only 1%. It's a shockingly low figure.
Yeah.
And so roughly half the population is missing out on those good jobs and the career path and the good income and the benefits. So we designed a way to bring those people in. And so at the same time, they're giving us something that we really needed, which is skilled labor in a time when good technical skills are rare. uh, we're also doing something for them. We're giving them opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have. And so you can imagine those people are very loyal, because they appreciate that opportunity. So there's a flywheel effect that you build when
Yep.
you look at a business, not just as a way to line your own pocket. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, everything, all the good stuff we do in our lives is because we have that cash flow to invest, to make decisions for the future, and to spend extra money on projects that we think might work, and experiments, and to make the investments in the community through charitable organization. We need the cash flow to do that. But the point is that that's not the only part. You got to
Hmm.
find a way to benefit not just the stockholders, which are my brother and I and my partners, but also the stakeholders, the community, the all the team members that show up and actually do the work for you every day.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I mean, creating the win-win is something that I really strive for it in every one of my business partnership deals or in my day-to-day life too. I think having that win-win mindset where you're like, it's not I winning or you winning, it's both of us winning, that is just a key catalyst in overall just success and fulfillment, with both parties. What would you say to someone who maybe doesn't know the path to creating win-wins? Is there a step or a strategy that you look for, or that follow in order to create win-win deals?
I guess I look, let me use the automotive technician example again. We start with what do we need? And then we work out from there. So I gave you an example. We needed skilled labor. We didn't have enough. So we said, who else can we bring in? Who are the other opportunities or what are the opportunities that we can make available to people who traditionally haven't had them? So that's sort of the thinking process there. But I'll give you another example. One of the things that we do, we try to, we're very aware in our automotive businesses that the products we sell generate a lot of carbon and other pollution that affects Mother Nature. And we're not crazy about that for obvious reasons. So as the society is working towards transitioning away from those fossil fuels, that doesn't mean we're just going to sit by the sidelines and do nothing. We have a role to play. And the part that we can control is in our facility. So we said, well, what are the things we can do here that will benefit the environment and also help us connect with the people that share those values? So I'll
Mm,
give you an example. We at the Subaru dealership, we put 374 solar panels on the roof, making it the first Subaru showroom in the world powered entirely by the sun, which is
love it.
cool. And we did it for the right reason. It was very expensive, and the return on it isn't. If I put that money, it was like $350,000 in 2011. If we had put that in Apple stock, it'd probably be $1 billion now,
Yeah.
right? We didn't do it.
Yeah.
So we didn't look at it as like, but we said, all right, we can afford it, and it pencils out. It's not going to torpedo the business to do this, and it satisfies our goals of making sure that we're greening our operations, reducing our environmental footprint, but also just as important is it gives us something to use to communicate with prospective customers about who we are.
Mm,
So one thing you will never see on the radio, I'm sorry, on TV or hear on the radio is a screaming ad from one of our dealerships saying we're the lowest price, come buy from us. Well, I
yeah.
mean, we're very competitively priced and we might be $100 less or $100 more on any given car. But we don't even talk about that at all because we'd rather connect with people that see the world our way. And one of the ways we do that is we talk about, we don't talk about the price of the car. We figure people will know they're getting a good value when they comparison shop. But we're talking about something at a higher level of abstraction. We're talking about the things we do to include, as I said before, women on our team, and hoping that people will appreciate the effort that we make
Mhm.
in that, and they'll appreciate the effort that we're making to greener operations and other things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's beautifully said and beautifully done. Like, tip of the hat to you guys, Jeff, seriously. Cause I mean, my brother and I, also have an eco business, Sustainable Breakthroughs. And then, we also have the Ecopreneur Evolution, that he's really spearheading. And I really do think the future, especially my generation and even younger, like they're very eco-conscious, and making that decision for you guys to put solar panels when it maybe isn't the most profitable decision, really does speak to those eco consumers, and it makes a difference. And I want you guys to think about that for your own businesses out there. What little things can you do that share your values, your morals, that really do speak to your customers subconscious, and that's how you build a brand, not just a business. That's how you
Yeah, it's a
build
very
a
good point.
tribe,
Yeah,
right.
right. Yeah, you build a much more loyal following because I think the traditional car dealership, we'll use that as an example. It's very transactional, and I mean that in the
Hmm.
most technical word of the transactional. It's like we're going to sell you a car today,
Yep.
but which we're happy to do. We're happy to work with people if they only want one Subaru or one Jeep from us, but we'd much rather build a relationship with those people over the time, which reduces our advertising expenses later, and it certainly builds a much more loyal clientele. I just want to add too that the whole notion, this profit wise concept that's the title of the book, I'm making the argument that in many cases that you don't have to um, encounter losses or incur losses to do the right thing. That doing the right thing is what helps you make more money. And I think both those examples, as it turns out, yeah, we did. I mean, who would have known to put put $350,000 in Apple stock in 2011 anyway. I mean, you have had to,
Yeah.
I guess maybe the really lucky or intelligent investors did that. But we looked at it and said, well, it makes sense because it's going to reduce our electrical consumption. And over time, it's still, so here we are 10 years later, it's now all paid off, and powers the power, we don't have a power bill.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And I think that it's an illustration of how you can do the right thing and live out your values in your company and actually strengthen it. you know
Mm.
I
Yep.
would give you a contrast with that. If you just love writing checks to charities, not there's anything wrong with that, but that's hard to do and do it sustainably, because that's sort of a win-loss. It's a win for the charity, but I mean, other than maybe a picture in the paper of you standing in front of the oversized check, it's hard to really make the connection with prospective customers on things like that. But other projects that you do, like the solar panels, or we landscape with goats, and instead of using mowers at our facility, which sounds a little crazy, but things like that are ways to
Love it.
communicate with people that they don't really cost that. They don't cost. I mean, it's not a huge expense. And I think that's profit wise, in the sense that for very little money, we can do something really cool, reduce our environmental footprint, and then have something to talk with our customers about.
Yeah. And just goats are great. I mean, we got goats out here in Montana. My neighbor's got a bunch of African dwarf goats. They're just hilarious to just watch and be around. And I love that you landscape your facilities with goats. I mean, it's such a great way to communicate your values, and I just think the whole profit wise concept is really, it speaks to me, Jeff. It really does. And I'm sure it speaks to a bunch of happy hustlers out there. And I want to give you a chance. Where can people go? I'm sure they want to read it. Where can people go to get it?
So jeffmorill.com, my website, will give you a link and a lot of other resources. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes, but it's
Yep.
spelled JEFFMORRILL.com. You'll get to my website, and there are resources there too that we use in our businesses every day. And I put those there. I had some friends who were like, wow, why are you putting all this secret sauce on your website for free? And I realized I've gotten to that age. I'm now 49, and I've life has been very good to me. And there was a time where I was really greedy about the things we had figured out in the devices. I'm sorry, not the devices, but the techniques and the documents and
Hmm.
those kinds of things that allow us that we had invest a lot of energy into creating and allow us to succeed every day. And you get to an age where you're like, you want to share those, because you see that if you can find other business owners that are willing to invest in their corner of the world, I want to see them succeed. And
Mm.
so I want to give them the tools that we've used, and hopefully maybe save them some of the pain that it took us to iterate those documents and things that I'm describing.
Yeah, I mean, I look on your website. I mean, there's templates and worksheets, there's bonus chapters, research citations, some of your favorite books. Like, you got so much value just from that book, profit wise, in addition to the extras that you give away. And I think the secret to living truly is giving, like, Tony Robbins says. And I think good karma does circulate, when you put good out and you get good back. So you can have that scarcity mindset, or you can have that abundant mindset where, here Jeff is giving away some of his unique IP, some of his best tools, tactics, tips, and his things that really made a difference, and really you had to pay for to create. You're giving them away.
Yeah, and not just money, but my life, and
Hmm.
life force, the prime of my life. You remind me, as you're talking about it, my grandmother said that you get everything you give in life, you just get it back from different people than you gave it to. And I
uh,
think about that. One of the things I so appreciate, there were so many educators, the teachers along the way, who made a lot less money than they could have made in other professions, that dedicated their careers, their lives to growing the next generation. I really admire teachers. And I think about all the sacrifices they made to grow me to the point where I could function in a positive way inside the economy and as a citizen. and it's incumbent upon me now, now that I've got enough, it's like, let's spread it around a little bit and share it. And I'm happy to do that with money, with the organizations that we support and that kind of thing. But in the context of the book and at the website, these are tools for businesses that I think that will help them earn more money and run their businesses in a way that does more for their communities.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of earning more money, I know you're big on the term making the slow buck. Break that down for us. What does that mean, making the slow buck?
Well, the quick buck is what you see on infomercials,
Yep.
and it's also, I think there's that phenomenon that the Instagram founders, they happen to
Mm,
bottle lightning. They started a company and within just a few years, they sold it to Facebook for $1 billion, which is
crazy.
just, and does that happen? Yeah, a few times in history. I mean,
Yeah.
like there's probably 10 billion people that have walked the earth, something like that. And that has happened a few times. So it's statistically not a reliable way to succeed in business. Does it happen? Yeah, but it doesn't happen very often. So I think realistically, most of us are going to end up in businesses that are pretty competitive. I mean, if you've got a small business, whether it's a restaurant, a plumbing company, a landscaping company, any of the ones that you're, a franchise that you might buy, any of those things, there's a lot of other people doing it. They're already, your competition is well established. The margins are not great. It's a slog. And I think it's important to understand that going in, that you're going to have to make a long-term commitment to earning a good living. And even the long-term commitment isn't enough. You have to make good decisions along the way and have quite a bit of luck. And I just bring it up because I think people have commented to me about the businesses that we now find ourselves running, and it kind of looks like it was an overnight success because I'm
Hmm.
quite young still, and I, at least, maybe not quite as young as I used to be, but not as old as I could be either. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important to remember that there were a lot of difficult times, getting to where we are, and a lot of sacrifices in terms of I'm still married to my first wife, but that was not a foregone conclusion during all those years where I was working too much,
Mm.
and also, I had some health problems. I ended up, without going into too much detail, and it being a terrible accident because of a very porous bones, which I acquired because I never got outside. I was under fluorescent lights,
Yep.
for decades underneath, showroom lights, and so there are a lot of sacrifice involved, and I wouldn't change it. I mean, I do it again. It's worked out great, but I just think it's important that if you feel like you're 3 years into a business, 7 years into a business, even 10 or 12, and you're not driving a fancy car yet, or you're not enjoying the cash flow that you had fantasized about, it might be because you're in the wrong business and you're not a very good business person. That's possible, but it could just as likely be that it just takes a long time, and the just like the beauty magazines can really screw up your head
Yep.
about what standards of beauty are. I think, Inc. and Entrepreneur Magazine and those kinds of magazines can really screw up entrepreneurs' heads about what success looks like too.
Ah, yeah, so true, man. And if you don't mind, I'd like to extract a little further, specifically in regards to your relationship, because one of the 10 alignments of being a happy hustler is loving relationships. And I see this all too often where fellow entrepreneurs of mine, a lot of them friends, they get to the top of the mountain, but they realize they're the only ones there. They've isolated themselves and they completely, they don't have the love in their life anymore. They might have got financial success, but everything else is suffering: their family, their friends, their fitness, their faith. And when I hear someone like you who's come out through the other side, I say, ooh, I want to learn from that. I want the happy hustlers to learn from that, because you probably did have an opportunity to end up alone on that mountaintop, but you made a pivot, right? And you changed
Yeah.
your view. Maybe you went back down the mountain and climbed a different one. Talk to us a little bit about what adversity your relationship faced throughout that growth period and how you overcame it.
Yeah, let me divide into two categories. I'll start first in the context of marriage. That I think it's important that your partner or spouse, if you're going to start a business, is on board with it, and that you can negotiate. And I don't mean in a like a
Yeah.
hard-nosed negotiation, but negotiate in terms of like working out what you envision the plan to be so that your spouse can be on board with some agreement about what it's going to mean. So let me put that in concrete terms. In my case, my wife and I, we discussed at great length before we decided to open the business what we were doing, and she knew that I was going to be pretty heavily involved in it for a long time, and we even set a time limit on it. We had an agreement going in before we opened the business that I was going to do it for 9 years. And if she wanted to, we had to move up to Boston from our native Virginia to open it, the first business, which was Planet Subaru. And we agreed that at 9 years we'd move back if she wanted to move back. So I had 9 years to make it or not, to see what we could do. And it turns out that we made it 18 years. And then she said, it's time. And fortunately, I referred earlier to the fact that I was burning out. One of the reasons why it was time for her is because she could see that it was time for me. I needed to get out of that situation.
It's a good
and just
woman.
not be in it every day. So anyway, long story short, I think it's really important for people to go in and work it out in advance.
Yep.
To have some agreement. It's just like, if you're going to get into a marriage, it's good to have conversations about whether you want to have kids or not. Say that you're not married 3 years, 5 years in, and one spouse says to the other, well, when are we having kids? And the other one's like, well, I don't want kids. Like, you need to work that out in advance. So I think that helps if there's good communication around it. In the case of friends, I just totally blew that. I didn't invest in friends. That to which you direct your attention in life is going to grow. And that principle works in reverse too. If you're not investing in things, then they're not going to go anywhere. And I just worked. And I had people I was close to at the dealership and in the businesses, which was good. And those people mean a lot to me. And they're a particular kind of friend. And many of them are deep relationships I think will continue to last for a long time. But in terms of like buddies, like I have precious few buddies. And I'll tell you, it's hard to do that at middle age because now all my friends, it's like I finally have the time. I have the freedom to do this. And all my friends, they got kids that are maybe just now getting their driver's licenses or not quite. They're spending all their time at soccer practices, and they're still in the thick of their careers, working long hours, paying down their home mortgages. They don't have any time for me. So now it's like the sins that I committed earlier in my life are being visited upon me. So I guess particularly for men, I do have this bit of advice that to make sure as you're climbing your business mountain, that you keep an eye on your friends and make sure that you spend time with them and invest in those relationships because they need to be maintained along the way because you don't just snap your fingers later in life and have good friends.
Such a great point there. I mean, it really is something that I want to extract even further. What you actually invest in, manifests, where you put your focus manifests it, whether you're focusing on a problem or you're focused on a solution, it manifests. And I think to your point with your relationship and with your friendships, you have to put the time and energy and attention into them or else they dissipate. Right. So I think with you, it's beautiful to hear that you're still married. Right. And do you have kids as well, Jeff?
No kids.
No kids. Yeah. So that was part of your agreement was no kids, right?
Yeah, we just didn't for whatever reason. I don't know what's wrong with us. We just never wanted kids, so we didn't have them.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with you, man. Everyone to each their own. That's a really great point there, and I think it's something that every happy hustler out there should really heed is focusing your time and attention into those loving relationships that you care so deeply about, because if you don't invest into them now, they might not be there when you do make it to the top of your business mountain, whatever that looks like for you. So really focus now on where you put your time and attention, guys. Now, Jeff, I do want to mention your unique hiring process, because I think building a great team is essential to succeeding in any business. You can't do it alone. You just can't. Like, and anyone who says that they're self-made, quote unquote, I just laugh at, because I know that's not the case. It's like no one is self-made. We all stand upon the shoulders of giants. We all, learn from others. We all leverage others' experiences and have mentors and coaches in some capacity. And I want to
Yeah, I
talk
agree.
about building a great team. And I know you've done that time and time again with your different businesses. Talk to us about your unique hiring process.
Well, let's start at the very beginning where we had basically no hiring process. Like many small and medium-sized businesses, we just didn't have any structure there. I mean, it's like we didn't have an HR person. We just kind of jumped in and opened up the business, and we kind of understood cars pretty well and vehicle transactions, because I had been working at a car dealership and a Volvo dealership. My brother just coincidentally was working at Ford Motor Company, so that's how we ended up getting together to open up our first dealership. And so when we started hiring people at the beginning, we were terrible. But I have this allergy to repeating mistakes. So as we made mistakes, we put in place steps to avoid those. And so we ended up with a process which I think is pretty straightforward. It's not the simplest thing in the world, but it's relatively easy to execute. And let me give you an example of how we ended up at multiple interviews. So the very first interview, or one of the first interviews, I ended up hiring a guy on the spot, and we set up his day that he was going to start, and he never showed up. And
Mm.
what I realized was that relying on my intuition alone, talking about hobbies for an hour and sports and whatever else we wasted our time on, was not going to work. So we said, all right, well, what did I do wrong is the question I asked after that happened. And we said, okay, well, obviously we need more people involved. So the process we have now, many stages down, many mistakes later, and many corrections later, we have a 3 interview process. You could do 2, you could do 4. We just find 3 is the sweet spot, because the first one is the assessment to make sure this person is worth introducing other people in the dealership or the other business too, because it takes a lot of effort to hire people. So you don't want to have 10 people sitting in on the first interview if it's that your opportunity at that first interview to discover that the person really isn't a fit. So we have more people at the second interview. We finish with a third interview, which is actually a shadow day, is what we call it. And it's not a traditional interview sitting in an office or a conference room. We actually invite someone to spend a day with us in the department where they're going to work. So in the case of an automotive salesperson, we'd invite them on a busy Saturday from, let's say, 10 to 4.
Mm.
And it's very casual. We ask them to introduce themselves to the team members, and we ask our team members to try to go out of their way to shake hands and say hi. Well, maybe not during a pandemic, but at least to do an elbow bump or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that gives our team, we get a lot of eyes on the candidate, and it's a way for the candidate to get to see, are these the kind of people that I could imagine spending my everyday with? And so that shadow day, just as for what it helped us do, was eliminate that rapid departure, that person that we'd hire and 3 weeks later they'd quit after all that training and energy bringing them on board, because they're like, this isn't what I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Now people kind of come in that full shadow day, and they're not going to get an entire appreciation for what the job is, but they're going to get to hear, like in the case of an automotive salesperson, they're going to see some grumpy customers. You're going to see those distrustful people that come in and just never surrender to our undealership process, our alternative to the typical dealership process, where we're not trying to hammer people into buying a car. We get people that just don't. We get customers who are just tough. They don't know what to do with it. They want to argue with somebody. And that's just part of being a salesperson. Even in a dealership like ours, our dealerships, we don't use that sales system, that process. We're very cooperative and consultative, but some customers, that's what they want. And
Yep.
our salespeople need to know, prospective salespeople, before they join us, that they're going to run into a few people like that, and they need to be prepared to deal with some grumpy people. And not everyone can do that. And so
Yeah.
that's a chance, that shadow day. So I describe the process in the book, and I have a lot of the interview scripts that we actually use during those first 2 interviews to try to surface the qualities that we find have been most successful in people that are currently doing the job. So an example of that is that we know conscientiousness is a really important thing in salespeople, because a salesperson that can't return a phone call can very easily alienate a customer and cause that person to buy somewhere else. Because if you're as a salesperson interfering with the customer's ability to do business with you, you're less likely to do business with them. And so we have questions, and the scripts are on my website, jeffmorill.com, where you can see how we try to get at those qualities, so that we can make sure that we're spending our time during the interviews asking really thoughtful questions that are going to bring out those qualities, instead of just talking about sports and hobbies and things that don't really tell you anything about the candidates.
Yeah, great process. So just to break it down, basically you're doing a 3-step interview process. There is the first interview, which is a general assessment. You have your questionnaire, you have your your intuition on full guard, but you're basically assessing if they earned a second interview, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
second interview includes somewhere between 1 to 10 people included in the interview process with you, correct?
Yeah, it'd be several. 10 would be, I don't think we've ever
Too
had that
much.
many, but
Yeah, that's a
it'd just
lot.
be, boy, that'd be intimidating, huh? But it's
Yeah.
a few. At that point, we're going to involve, several managers at that
Okay.
point. Yep.
So interview 2, you have several perspectives to help assess the candidate, and really do due diligence and ask the different questions and get perspective. Then the third step in the process is an actual shadow day, where you're taking them to do the work and follow someone who's currently in that position or in that department, where then you can see them interact with the customers, how they actually vibe with the tribe, who is on your team. And then just kind of make a general decision from there based on all 3 of those different, touch points, those assessments. And then you decide yes or no to hiring. Do you do a 30-day process, or like a trial period, or are you like, nope, you're on the team, let's party?
Yeah, we just assume at that point. I mean, we can't be sure, and we've made mistakes and continue to make mistakes. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say that our I think we have a really good process, but it doesn't deliver perfect results.
Mm.
But we just assume that we're gonna make that person, succeed, or they're going to make themselves succeed with our effort. One of the
Mm-hmm.
ways we do that, though, is that we don't just stick, like in the case, I keep go back to the automotive salesperson example, but it's probably a position that people can sort of imagine, so it's probably a good one in that way, that we make sure we train them really well.
Yep.
So we start with people. One of the ways we provide that undealership experience I was talking about before is we intentionally go out of our way to hire people who have not worked at other dealerships. So in
Mm-hmm.
many cases, we have people that never sold anything. Maybe they've sold cell phones in the mall or something like that, or certainly not cars. We don't want people that have sold cars before. So they need a lot of training. And I don't mean training like how's the best way to shenaniganize a customer. I mean
Yeah.
that, but training in terms of, like, they need to understand. A lot of people come in, they don't even understand like the parts of the car. We have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
start kind
True.
of basic. I mean, it's like, this is a brake rotor, and
Mm.
this is what a brake rotor does. And they don't have to be an expert, be able to take it off, but they need to know that what four-wheel disc brakes are and analog
Yep.
brakes. And there's a lot of just kind of technical stuff, but also in terms of the process. We wanted to one of the things we focus on is asking a lot of questions, so that we can make sure that we can make recommendations that are very closely tailored to a customer's needs.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to make sure, as I told you before, we're happy to sell whatever they want to buy, but we want them happy enough with the car that they bought that they'll want to do it again in 3 or 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
And the better we can understand what they need, we can adapt to their budget and in terms of the capabilities of the vehicle they need.
Yeah. Real quick, I'm curious. I mean, sales are the lifeblood of any business. Let's just, call it what it is, right? Let's talk sales, because I love sales personally. I think that's one of the differentiating factors in my success, as limited as it has been, especially compared to a guy like you. However, I do know that sales are essential. And I know the happy hustlers out there value sales. Do you have any hierarchy, like sales principles that you can share with the happy hustlers out there that might help them, increase their close rate?
Yeah, let me give you a philosophical thing, which is sort of strategic rather than a tactical approach, which is, we like to think of our salespeople, instead of closing a sale, we like to think of them opening a sale because it's an opening to a new relationship. And that's not just words. The juxtaposition of those two things, it has real meaning. And let me explain what I mean by that. Is that when you close a sale, the traditional notion, you have this idea that somehow a salesperson is really strong and they're going to find a way to persuade or convince or cajole someone into doing something. And I think the quicker you can abandon that theory of sales, the better off you're gonna be. The profit wise approach and the way that I'd like to think that we do every day relies instead on finding a way to get out of the way and let the customer accomplish what he or she wanted when he or she came in.
Mm,
And so what that means, I told you before, like we put a premium on conscientiousness. I think we're less interested in overcoming objections, which is a typical sales term, and
mhm,
more like removing obstacles. And what I mean by that is that I think we've all had that experience where you get that salesperson and you want whatever they're selling, but they make it nearly impossible for you to actually buy it. Like
mm,
they won't answer a question that you need answered to proceed, or they won't call you back to take your credit card, or they go ahead and write the order for the sale, but then don't submit it. So the product doesn't show up. And I mean, all the million things that happen. And so I think it's really important that what we look for is people that can follow through on their commitments. They're organized. They can do what they say they're going to do. We don't look for particularly persuasive people because I don't really think that that's the way products should be sold. I don't think people respond to that. I certainly don't. If I go into a furniture store because I need a piece of furniture, I'm not going to respond well to someone telling me I need to buy it today or the price is going to go up. Like that just
mhm.
doesn't work. I mean, I don't appreciate that. I feel very threatened by that. And I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So our job, just how do we make it easy? How do we make it fun? How do we make it honest and transparent? Those are the questions that we're asking.
Yeah, great points. I mean, especially in regards to, just sales in general, but like when you are selling something, I love this term, professional mind maker upper, like you're helping them make a decision as a salesman, like, or a saleswoman, that's kind of your role, is to, like you said, remove the objections or the restrictions, and open a sale, not necessarily close a sale, and just operate with integrity and honesty, and just, keep it real. Like that's, I think, people's BS meters these days are so high. Like, it's not, those tactics don't work like they used to, and I really love your perspective on sales. So thanks for sharing that. Now, Jeff, I do want to get into the portion of the interview where I ask a couple different questions in multiple disciplines. I call them happy hustle hacks. So this is basically where you share, something that you do that maybe adds value to the happy hustlers out there listening, that is in each different category. And I first want to talk about health, because we talked about it early in the interview with you being a vegetarian, but I'm curious, do you have a happy hustle hack for your health? Something that helps keep you mentally and physically strong?
Yes, I eat leftovers for lunch every day of my life.
Oh,
And and so how is that a healthy hack? Well, I'll tell you this, that when you have your meal already worked out in advance, it's you can build in a lot of nutrition into it and remove a lot of temptation. So if you're one of those people who works in an office and you get to work and it's 12 or 12:30, it's 1 because you had a long phone call, and then you've got to go find something to eat, you might end up with something healthy, or you might end up with something not so healthy. And it's also expensive, of course, to go out. So the beauty of leftovers, my wife and I, we just make big batches of food. And then, and I've come to, is the flavor quite as good as the first night you eat it? Usually not. But I'll tell you, the convenience and the nutrition make up for it. I mean, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
you have a fresh lunch at a restaurant, that's probably going to taste better than the pasta and tofu that you made last night or whatever. But it's good enough, and
Yep.
it's very time efficient, it's very cost efficient, and it gives you control when you have the discipline to feel like you're wanting to exercise control over what's actually going into your body.
Yeah, great point there. I mean, I find myself eating leftovers all the time, and I just subconsciously do it for convenience, but also for nutrition purposes. It makes a lot of sense. And like I got some elk chili stew in the fridge right now. I'm about to eat for lunch after this. So it's a great point, and I love that happy hustle hack. Now let's talk about money, because I know you made a bunch. I'm sure you've misstepped and lost a bunch too on your journey. What would you say is a happy hustle hack for money that you can share? Something that's maybe helped you save or invest or spend wisely.
I try to calibrate my investment of energy when I'm spending money to how much money is involved. So when we do, like right now, we're having to replace. We've expanded our Subaru facility, and we the old one wasn't the old phone system was couldn't be expanded. So we had to start from scratch. It was painful.
Mm,
So it's about a $50,000 system, phone
mm,
system. And we're also going to have to live with the function of it for many years. So we've put a ton of time into vetting that process and
mm,
asking all the hard questions. And if it's something like, we pay our for to recycle our paper, to shred and recycle, it's about $120 a month we pay per facility. Like, we're not going to spend a lot of time shopping that deal. Like,
yeah.
whatever. What are you going to say? $10 a month, $20 a month? It just doesn't make sense to even switch. I mean, maybe if you could get it for $10 a month, you'd say, all right, well, $100 a month over the years, $1,200 a year, whatever. But I think early on in my career, I didn't have that nuance. I just over invested in every possible expense line in my business, and I didn't realize that the energy should be spent on the expensive stuff, and the little stuff wasn't worth fussing with. And I think that applies even for people who don't own a business yet, even within the context of your household. When you go buy a car, pay attention what that car payment is, because you're going to make 60 of them. you know.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you go a little overboard for a restaurant dinner one night, it's a single event, whatever you spent, $30 or $50 more, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Great points there. Really just evaluating the overall importance long term of the decision. And I always like to say too, is it a want or is it a need? And focusing on, depending on where you're at financially, only purchasing needs, and tabling the wants until you are at a place financially where you can afford it. Great,
Yeah,
great share.
just to reinforce that point, car dealers love their nice facilities, and for years we had a very modest facility, and it was old, and the tires were old, and we just lived with it because we really wanted a nice facility, but we realized that paying down our debt and making other investments were going to generate a better return for us long term. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually we got to the point where we did have the money and we invested in a beautiful facility. But it's good advice, I think, that you're making, not to get carried away with stuff that really isn't that important. It doesn't really change much in your business. Wait till you have abundant cash flow before you fuss with those things.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. Amen to that. And speaking of spirituality, do you have a happy hustle hack for your spirituality practices? I mean, not necessarily like one God or another, or, I don't know what you believe in, but do you have a mindfulness practice or a spiritual practice that we could deem a happy hustle hack?
Yeah, I meditate. I'm not religious. I used to be. I grew up in a very, very strict Catholic household and abandoned that.
Mhm.
But I'm not even here to sell meditation, but there is something I think that is very useful and practical, and that is I leave my phone in my pocket when I have a few minutes. So I think it's tempting. We're so used to constant stimulation. If you're waiting in the doctor's office or something, you got 5 minutes to wait, to pull out your phone and respond to texts. And if there's a call I need to take or a text that's urgent, of course I'll respond. But I think we can get sucked to the screen every moment of our lives and replace those pauses with stimulation. And so what I try to do is when I have a few minutes, to just be alone with my thoughts, and I don't generally come up with any big insights or anything during that time. It's just what a brain should do. It
Yeah.
should have a few moments of downtime to daydream, and pay attention and observe. And that's not traditional meditation. More formal meditation, I do that too, is more structured and focused. But I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, very important. I mean, one of the 10 alignments again of the Happy Hustle, my, proprietary framework, is nature connection. And another one is unplug digitally. Like those two alone can skyrocket your happiness and truly allow you to get out of your own head and into your own heart and tap into peace and deep wisdom and knowledge that maybe has been untapped, like when we just are constantly getting those dopamine hits and picking up the social media to scroll or and I'm guilty of this. Like, I don't claim to be perfect in any of this, Jeff,
Oh yeah,
like
me
nor do
too.
you.
Me
Yeah,
too.
nor I'm
Yeah,
sure.
there are times when my phone comes out of my pocket and
Yeah,
I realize, what am I doing? It's
yeah.
like I'll catch myself. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, but one of the things that I think really is beneficial is the airplane mode feature. You just a little swipe, and like today, I didn't take my phone off of airplane mode until like 10:45 in the morning. So I had my whole morning just uninterrupted to work on. Actually, I was doing copywriting for my upcoming master class. And I was like getting creative. And I think when we can just get like, because we are reactive with our devices so much, so when things come up, it's just responding, reactivity and dopamine hits. And it's a great point that you made. Leave it in your pocket, preferably even on airplane mode, and you'll be happier. So great shares there. Now, Jeff, I do want to run through the rapid fire round. This has been a great interview, and I know we went a little longer than anticipated, but I'm enjoying it, and I hope you are too. Now, this is basically where I ask you random questions, and you just answer honestly, first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Except for whatever, you don't ask me what my favorite movie is, because I'll just
Oh,
sit here and stare at the ceiling. I know that's one of your favorites. So skip to the next one. Yes, I'm ready.
okay. Favorite book? Go.
Favorite book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
Haven't read that. Favorite food?
My wife's birthday cake, she makes it for me only once a year because it takes her so long. It's coconut chocolate.
Oh, I love that. Favorite exercise?
Running, trail running,
Favorite sport?
baseball.
Okay. What is your spirit animal, Jeff?
A cat, a house cat.
I
Yeah,
love that. I love
yeah.
that. That's
Not
so
like
good.
something fierce or anything. I just love to take a nap and curl up.
Oh my gosh. That is one of the best answers I've ever heard, Jeff. I got to say. Best business advice.
Make sure you have love in your model.
Mm,
And here's what I mean by that. That's a phrase my dad introduced to me. He's a retired school teacher, and he meant by that phrase that whatever you do, an institution should make sure that it's having a positive benefit for all the people who depend on it. Because otherwise, what's the point? In the context of a business, if all it does is line the pockets of the stockholders, but causes harm to the environment or to the team members or to the community that's depending on, or generates a ton of pollution, like what the hell good's that? So when you have love in the model, it means to live your days in a way and make decisions so that your business, your family, your civic organization, your church is actually producing good while it's going about all of its other activities.
boom. Love it. I mean, well said. What is your, if you could have one superpower, what would that superpower be?
It would be to be able to go to any place and see what that place looked like at any time. So I guess that's time travel. So I love history and I love landscapes. And I'll give you an example. We have a property, the one I live on, it's a mountain in Albemarle County, Virginia. And many families have lived on different parts of the mountain over the years. And I can see the ruins that are left behind, the foundations and the chimneys and the root cellars. And I would just love to go back 150 years and see them toiling in the fields, and work. I just think that'd be so cool.
I love that. Not a rapid fire response, however, a great story. If you had one billboard for the whole world to see, and this was your last piece of content, what would that billboard say?
Live well and do good.
Well said. And three things you're most grateful for.
Number one is all the people, as I mentioned before, who helped me grow into the person that I've become. Number two is growing up in this country, which has so much opportunity. And for all its flaws and failures, that passion for being a force for good in people's lives and for the world still lives on in us. And the last thing is my health, because I've had some health challenges and I've realized that without that, you got nothing.
Boom. Love it. Well, Jeff, this has been amazing. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. Thank you so much for sharing your love, your light, your wisdom with the Happy Hustlers. I mean, truly, this has been an awesome interview. And, it really inspires me to just do even more good with my business. And I hope it does that for the Happy Hustlers out there. So thank you again, Jeff. I just want to acknowledge you. Now, where's the best place for people to connect with you online and pick up your book? Why don't you give us some links again?
Yeah, so jeffmorill.com has all the resources that I mentioned during our discussion earlier. And also, if someone wants to order the book, and there's also free chapters if you can't afford the book right now. I remember that was the case for me at a time. I couldn't buy every book that I wanted to. And if people are interested in learning about that alternative dealership model that I was describing, some of the cool things we do, and if someone's inspired to try to connect with their customers in a way other than just talking about price and service and product quality, they could visit planetsubaru.com and see the kinds of things we're doing there.
Very cool. Love it. Now, final question, Jeff. What does happy hustling mean to you?
It means making sure that you learn today whatever you can to improve, and so that you can serve yourself and others better tomorrow.
Boom. Mic drop. Thanks everyone for watching and listening. We're out. Peace and love.